Now being recorded.
Well, let me just do a bit of fiddling. Good. So, thank you again, all of you, for coming. So I was just saying, Catherine, to the others before you joined us, that we're going to be focusing mostly on the spending on resources.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah,
yes.
great, thank you. And I should also just say, if you do lose teleconferencing at any point, there you should see a little phone icon up in the menu bar at the top there. So if your phone dies and when you dial back in, or your internet dies or whatever, that little green icon, you can reconnect the audio there. Okay, good. So I'm just going to hide the attendees pod for a sec. And so, first of all, we sent you these charts of data which are sort of summarising the patterns of funding in schools over the last few years and anticipated for the next year and projected for this year. I assume you've all had to scan down those, but you should be able to scroll up and down in those. They're probably a bit small for you, I appreciate, but you get the picture anyway, I think, without being able to do the numbers. What's the sort of feeling about future funding in schools at the moment? Is it as picture suggests, or do you feel more optimistic in your school than this picture suggests, or anyone like to kick off with a comment about how funding feels just now?
Sorry. I feel very less optimistic. And we were hoping that the new funding formula was going to help us in rural schools, but we've been told by the county that it's not actually. That they haven't really worked it all out, but it seems as though we're going to have even less. So I'm not optimistic.
Okay. And so that's national funding formula, which is the year after next.
Yeah, but so they haven't really been able to make that clear, and it doesn't seem as though it is going to help us.
No. And what about for before that even? What about next year? Does this picture seem to reflect?
No, it looks pretty grim. Though we are just in the process of applying to be an academy, so we're hoping that might make a difference. I know you don't get the huge amount of money you used to get, but we're hoping that with working, with a lot of other schools, that it may be able to save some money there.
So you'll be joining as a trust, as a
academy chain, yes.
Okay.
Maria,
Good.
can I interject? We're in the same point, and obviously you can't have a deficit budget, so not a lot to spend this year to make sure that we've got enough of a carry forward to become a MAT.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So,
we're part of a trust at the moment, a co-op, but obviously a couple of members don't want us to come out because good followed by good, etc. So that stopped us becoming a MAT before Christmas. It should be by May, but we've got to make sure that we've got a really heavy carry forward for that.
Okay, thanks, Maria. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, I have to say. So, do you know how big that would have to be in order for you to be eligible to join the MAT? The carry forward.
I think way less than sort of 30, 35. I think is the bottom line.
Right.
In nice black terms with nothing else built in, etc. Which for a small school like us is a member of staff and a couple of support staff.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Any others want to share their angst or perhaps optimism about that?
Yeah, Zoe here. Yeah, just to reiterate really that the funding is certainly worse than we thought it was going to be, really, which puts us in a more concerning position than we thought we were. We are part of a multi-academy trust now, only a small one, but because there's a shortage of school places in our area, we've got a free school application in, and it's through increasing numbers in our school and increasing numbers through the free school that we think will, keep afloat, basically.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a common thing. There's a lot of schools around here are expanding for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Zoe. Alistair, you have your hand up.
Yes. I just want to say the national picture does look a bit more gloomy, but on the other hand, what we've been forced to do, because we're also part of a multi-academy trust, is just really to see what we can do to sort of anticipate the situation. So one of the things we've been doing was we've been looking at centralizing certain services So, for example, having a central HR department or a central IT department for all the schools across the trust. So, on the one hand, it is gloomy in terms of the national funding formula, but on the other hand, that is forcing us to look for other solutions, which actually, I would say that's making the outlook slightly more positive as a result.
That's interesting. In fact, one of the things I want to come back to at the end is just that sort of question about are there any other sorts of strategies that schools are using to sort of work around the budget situation. So, yeah, thanks, Alistair. Stuart?
Yeah, just to say really that for us, the budget is a huge concern. So we've actually looking at we've oversubscribed, so we've actually increased our admission numbers for next year. But obviously there's a sort of lag before any funding comes through. You've got to fund it yourself until sort of next April. But again, reiterating what people are saying, we're looking at academy status, and obviously the imperative to not be in a deficit before you go into that. It means that, if anything, it could even be take the squeeze for 1 year or 2 years until you're safely amalgamated into a mat.
Yeah. What do you see as the financial benefits of joining a mat? Similar things?
I don't. Well, to be quite honest, I don't really see any. We're in sort of rural North Yorkshire, so the schools that we would have to join, geographically are going to be quite spread out.
Right.
However, if you don't, and you're one of the last in the sort of local authority, what sort of support is that going to be able to offer? On tracks. So really, it's, in an ideal world, we would all stay with the local authority. That's probably not going to be possible.
No, it's certainly the way it's going most places. Thank you. Okay, good. Anyone with a note of optimism just on there, without the sort of dramatic alternatives of joining a mat? Or anyone doing quite nicely? Thank you.
Hi, this is Elizabeth.
Hi.
We're not doing quite nicely. I wouldn't go that far, but I think there was a lot of preempting of having to cut resources later on down the line. Than a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, there was redundancies made, which I think have helped in the long run.
Okay. So you're actually in a reasonable position because
I wouldn't say reasonable, but maybe better than some.
Okay. Yeah, good.
We're still trying to find ways to, I suppose, find savings, but I think, compared to some people, we're in a better situation.
Can I just start, that's an interesting point you mentioned about redundancy. So I did say earlier that we were trying to focus on resources, but I would just like to hear from all of you, maybe just in the chat pod now. Could you just say, maybe with a yes or a yes plus some numbers, if you are making if you have redundancies planned for the next academic year to try and save money? I'd just like to have a quick straw poll of all of you there. So if you are making any redundancies next year, it'd be nice just to hear about that and what sort of scale that's on. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to hide. Actually, can I just check the poll at the bottom there? I can see 6 of you have voted. Anyone who hasn't voted in that poll down at the bottom, if you could just do that now, then I'll clear those. I'll hide the chats whilst you're doing that. Okay, good. So, I'll just show you what people said. So, it looks as if those are all there or thereabouts, reflecting the pattern. So, the pattern obviously being that the situation is bad and has dramatically got bad. If you look at it's interesting to see the trends as they happen with changes in government without wishing to put a political spin on it. You could see that with the old Labour government, the funding and optimism about budgets was high, and then took a dip when they left and the coalition took over, and gradually climbed throughout that period, and then fell off the cliff again when the current government came to power. And then an even bigger drop, if anything, this year. So, yeah, it's challenging times. The head at the school at which I'm chair of governors, after 25 years retired this year. And he said it was the worst situation he's ever known it to be. So, and that was amazing coming from him, who's an eternal optimist. Anyway, so I'm just going to look at some other charts from this report, so just bear with me. You can, by the way, make any of these pages bigger. There's a little expand button in the top window. In fact, I'm just going to make it pretty big anyway. And I should be able to see that now. So, the report, BESA's report on resources, which was commissioned this year, January I think they ran it, said that more schools than recorded in previous years suggest school budgets will be lower in cash terms than provided in the current year. That's kind of the data we've seen as well. Such concerns are also placing pressure on head teachers being able to maintain resource budget allocations and spending on classroom learning resources. So this is the proportion of schools which is saying that they're expecting a decline in the resources budget for next year, and you can see how people have responded to that over previous years. So in 2013, 30% of heads thought that their resources budget would take a dip in the following year. That's more than doubled between then and now. I should say that the little bubbles, little speech bubbles, I don't really like the way those numbers are displayed, because they're percentage points that they're showing rather than percentage change. So they're basically the previous year's taken away from this year's. It's not a percentage swing, it's percentage points change. Does that, so 2/3, in other words, of schools are saying they're expecting to spend less on resources next year. Does that particularly chime with the position in your schools? Is anyone feeling that they aren't perhaps cutting how much they're going to spend on budgets next year? Do you know? Have you decided yet?
I won't be able to spend as much on resources, but I want to make sure I can keep my staff because they are my main staff.
Okay. So you're cutting back on, on the resources budget, but you want to preserve staffing. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts about that?
I think we're planning to try and maintain what we've got at the moment, but there will be no addition to that. And like other people have said, you know, everybody's jobs. The point is that we want to protect everybody's jobs.
Okay, that's interesting. In fact, I've got another slide coming up in a minute, which I'd like to pick your brains about. Do any of you, so where there are these resource cuts happening, have any of you identified particular areas where that might happen, whether that's a subject area or a kind of resource provision or a service that you have been buying until now but will cut back next time? Have any of you identified anything particular that you could share with us?
I'm afraid it seems to be it seems to be the foundation subjects that lose out. When you've got so much pressure with data and you have to keep it, you know, your literacy and your maths, I'm afraid it's those other subjects that tend to get pushed out, and we're also charging parents more sometimes for extracurricular things that perhaps we would have tried to have covered before ourselves.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, simple things such as like printing allocations and methods of printing, how much the students are allowed to print, and limit on staff printing and things like that. But actually, it all seems common sense, and in a way, I don't know why it wasn't done before, because both staff and students had unlimited, and therefore there was waste. So some of it, you know, has come about because of this. But actually, we probably should have been doing some of those things anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So you think it's just sensible housekeeping?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I was going to say that we've made cuts to our subscriptions, particularly. We're looking at subscriptions that have been taken out and working out a lot of the ICT technical computing things are done by subscriptions, so you're having to pay every single year, and they're increasing. So that's one particular area where we're trying to look at and make some cuts.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I think another one is also things like the catering as well, because at the moment we use the city services, but from what other schools have said, that is a one way that you can really cut expenditure by perhaps having something more in-house. We haven't moved to it yet, but that's definitely a big consideration, especially in a very big school.
Okay.
Joe, we've in our primary school we've been encouraging a lot more internal CPD. So by that I mean key members of staff delivering CPD for not only our staff but 3 other primary schools working closely alongside us. And when we do buy in external CPD, again, we generally, being the largest school in the area, we're hosting an event which we will initially fund, but other primaries will chip into. So that's kind of a win-win for everybody tonight.
Right. Good. Okay, good. Thank you. And just wanted to see what you think about this particular finding and whether this chimes with what's going on in your school. And just to ask you, if it does, where the sort of axe might fall. So the BESA report says, once spending on identified categories as a result of the review, there's a clear evidence that 2016 will record contraction in furniture for primary schools, teaching aids and equipment, and ICT in both primary and secondary. Does that seem to chime with what's going on? So anyone got anything to say about furniture? Are primary schools cutting back on furniture? Is that your experience? No? Okay.
No, not really. Our furniture's all right, so and I wouldn't want to cut back on ICT either.
Okay.
It's key to us.
Okay, good, thank you. So I'm just going to put the attendee pod back on. Okay, good. Any thoughts about the ICT thing then from anybody? Is that any of you thought about ICT? So what sort of areas are you not spending on?
We're actually going to be spending a bit more on ICT in the next year. We've got a pot of money for it, so we're going to be looking at how we can actually expand or get some new form of IT, and we're currently heads of faculty are currently consulting with someone on the leadership team to talk about what their needs would be, so we can make sure it's invested in products which are going to be useful, if you like, because we've not invested in ICT for a while.
And so you're talking about hardware, presumably?
It could be lots of different things. We're looking at various different types of things, like packages, actual computers, like whether we want, whether we want to use iPads, things like that.
Okay.
But we want things that are actually going to be used. So I think there's people to go down to. There's like an electronic classroom down south you can go to look at different things that can be used.
Okay.
To make sure that when we do invest, it's invested in things that are going to be worthwhile.
Right. I saw a cool thing at BESA, I don't know if you saw it, which is a bus that you can book and it tours schools and shows you various types of stuff.
I'm really sorry, the line's really bad. I can barely hear.
I think it might be. Sorry, we'll see if I can. We'll just go quiet for a minute. I'll see if I can track which one it is. Catherine, I think it might be your phone that's causing the issue. It's
right.
showing.
I'll try another extension, shall I?
Yeah, please. If you just dial out and back in again, that'd be great.
Right, okay.
Remember the phone icon at the top of the screen will get you back in.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good. So, where was I? So, any other... actually, I was going to ask, who was speaking just now? Was that Vera?
No, that was Elizabeth. It's Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, sorry. Do you have an idea of the sort of size of budget you've got then? Are you...
No, I don't know. No, I know I just know that's what we're going to be doing.
Okay.
I think it's quite sizable though. It is quite sizable. It's not a small amount.
Right.
Because they're looking at doing quite a lot with it.
Okay. Great.
I don't know numbers, apologies.
And do you know where the budget's come from? Is it grant funding or money you've saved up?
I have no idea, I just know
Right.
that it's there and we've spoken about it.
Okay, good. That's a nice position to be in. Good, thank you. Any other comments about ICT funding in particular? No. Okay, good.
Joe,
Yes,
sorry,
Joe? Go on.
we've been, well, we feel we're quite ICT rich for a primary. We've invested over the previous 3 years quite heavily. Haven't, you know, the usual laptops, but also tablets, Kindles, and so on. We've had a bit of a freeze on the ICT hardware budget this year, a bit of a clampdown with the children and the staff. So when machines have been accidentally, I'm sure, broken and misused, we've not replaced readily because of the sheer cost. We've sourced additional funding for ICT, and we found we were eligible for a pot of money from the Belling Trust, a local link, so that brought in thousands for sole use on ICT. So we were very lucky there to have that extra pot for software, which we put that towards. But we'll need to invest again. Again, not sure on figures or percentage, but we'll need to invest again next year.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. So I just wanted to then just move on to look at more, I said we're focusing on primary, on resources, sorry, mainly, but here's just a little broadening out for a minute. So I just wanted to look at these factors. So this data is the number of schools who've said that one of these areas is a key area for spending during this current financial year. So you can see CPD spending is a key area in 46% of schools. Well, last year it was 48%. That's the little number in the circle. The interesting thing I thought from this was, this is primary, the number of teaching assistants. So 28% of schools are saying that that's a key area, whereas previously it was 16. I just wondered whether, well, I'll ask you first before I hypothesise. Have any of you specifically said we're going to spend more money on teaching assistants, or have recruited an additional teaching assistants for this financial year? Is that anything that's going on?
Yes, Catherine. It's because we do use them more and more now for teaching groups. They seem to be key for our teaching. So we have trained up, and we do keep appointing teaching assistants to take intervention groups and to teach groups, because we find that's now a more effective way, especially in the large classes that we have in my school.
Okay, good, thank you. Is there anyone else using more teaching assistants?
Maria?
Yep, Maria.
Only because we've got a high proportion of children with SEN needs, and now with people who are on statements having to go on to an EHC, and the funding there, I seem to have spent the last month trying to sort out funding, and then, you know, obviously with that will come another TA, another support member of staff. I've spent half term just trying to completely streamline my support staff, number of staff, who's doing what, etc. That's just been my life.
Really?
Yes, this week.
Gosh.
I'll be glad to just go back to school.
Okay.
Because, as I say, you don't want redundancies, and with such mixed age classes and small children, it's a huge priority for us.
Okay.
You know, pupil premium, you've got to make sure that that's being covered.
Right, yeah, true.
Yeah.
Just anyone else? Just, I suppose, simple yes or no, for whether you are spending more money on teaching assistants this year. Nope, okay, so it's 2 out of 8 of you that are. So I was wondering there really if that's become a key area because some of the others have become less important rather than because it's a growth. So we've had 2 examples where it is. A lot of the other things you'll notice have generally in decline. So buildings 35% down to 18%, ICT 27 to 22, etc., etc. So we mentioned earlier about protecting staffing. Does that extend to teaching assistants? So if you were thinking about cutting areas, do you think that even if you're not spending more on teaching assistants, you would tend to put those at the bottom or towards the bottom of the list of things that you would cut? Any thoughts on that?
Joe, yes, I think it would be at the bottom of the list of things we would cut. We, sorry, I forget who previously spoke, we streamlined our whole staffing structure probably 2 years ago now, and so we're quite happy with numbers. So yes, we wouldn't be putting any more money in the pot for teaching assistants, but we certainly wouldn't be looking to reduce the costs there.
Right, okay. Have any of you cut back on teaching assistants this year? Opposite end of the spectrum?
We have, Vera, St John's.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely cut back on teachers this year because we were fortunate enough, being in a London school, to be quite well funded. So we had additional teachers last year because we felt that teacher interventions were so much more powerful than teaching assistant interventions.
Right.
But they were sort of supply teachers. They weren't on our sort of permanent books. They were additional staff, and we don't have those this year.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you for that. So I just want to show you the equivalent data for secondary then. Let me just jiggle that about. So you'll notice in this one, in the bottom right, teaching assistants pretty much the same as last year. Big difference for me here is a resource difference, and that's for print and digital content, which 63% of people are talking about content, whereas last year it was 27%. Now, some of that I would guess would be down to the fact that the specifications have changed, but of course there were new specs last year as well. Anyone want to comment on that? Is that the whole story, that it's just new specs, or has anyone invested particularly more in the content this year than previously? Any other reasons?
When it comes to a subject content, if you like, that would be down to heads of faculty and how they spent their budget. They've got quite a lot of autonomy with that, but I would assume that's due to the change in specifications.
Right, okay. Good. Any other comments on that? No.
I'm surprised that the teachers... Sorry, you go
sorry,
ahead.
Go on.
Zoe, I'm surprised that the teachers isn't higher, because it certainly would be for us, because basically teachers are the key resource, and by far the majority of the budget goes on teachers. We do have quite on paper we have a low staff to student ratio. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have very small class sizes or anything, but we do have plenty of staff, and it's so much the priority. So there is, there's a fairly small amount left for other things, but that's very carefully thought out.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Zoe. Any? Sorry, was that Stuart? Were you going to say something? Was that you?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that really, that if we looked at ours, that the proportion spent on teaching would be higher.
Yeah, so remember, this is the number of the proportion of schools that are saying this is a key area, not the percentage spent on it. But I do take your point. As Vera said, you would imagine that would be all schools, wouldn't you? I suspect this is a problem with. If we'd been doing this survey, I would have left teachers out because they're on a completely different scale to everything else. And I think probably it would have. There are better ways of asking the question than what's your key area, basically. But I suspect a lot of people didn't answer that because they just thought that, well, it's obvious that teachers are, like we said, all the way through. Thanks for pointing that out. I think that's probably a sort of flaw in the survey. Okay, good. Any other comments about any of those numbers? So CPD training seems to be more of a focus this year. I'm guessing again that's possibly down to spec change, do you think, or any other factors?
Yeah, it could possibly be with the change of spec and the change of measurement, the Progress 8, etc., etc.
Yeah, true.
The use of data and all of those sort of surrounding issues as well.
Okay. And so one of the things for both primary and secondary, I'll just hide these so that you're not So we talked earlier about protecting staffing. I think Zoe, you'd said that. I think somebody said it before you, in fact. That you'll cut back on other things in order to protect staffing. I'm just wondering if there are other things that are perhaps not as important as staffing, but are almost. So things that you would tend to want to protect, where you might cut other things. What are the areas that are sort of more sacrosanct? Any thoughts about that, anybody?
Well, I suppose the the maintenance and the cleaning of the building and making sure that it's a safe environment. Those things we wouldn't want to slip at all, because that's all part of the safety of students and their well-being, etc., etc.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah,
we also want our children to have decent books and equipment and things that they really can take pride in. And so I think that's still very important, just basic exercise books and books to read as well. I think the library is still very, very important. Digital can't overtake that.
No, there's a certain ethos to a library that a computer can't hope to emulate. Thank you. Alistair, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I'd just like to add, I think anything to do with teaching and learning, because that's the core business of what we do. So anything directly related to teaching and learning, I would not like to see compromised.
Okay. Yep, good. Thank you. And if you would, let's imagine, maybe this is, maybe it's not imagining but remembering, if you were cutting your budget for next year, what would be the decision-making process about which areas would get less money? Who would do that, and what sort of decision-making process would there be in place? Anyone want to? Let's have someone who's not said anything for a while. Who's not said anything for a while? Can't think. I think you've all said something. let's pick somebody at random. Maria.
SNT, because we're so small, so basically that's all of us, really. It impinges on all of us.
So you all sit round a table and look at individual items or individual areas or policies?
Just the priorities that we've had. Our big spend's going to have to be a new server for our IT system, so that's out of everybody's hand.
Okay.
Obviously, literacy and numeracy is protected, as it would be. Our SEM provision is really important, so I'm quite lucky that I get to keep a fairly unlimited budget. But all the other subjects, it's just a case of... my boy's a Tesco store manager, so you see, I'm able to get money that way. It's quite a lucrative thing to explore.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, out into the community and bids and things like that. So, we're very good at that, but the big decisions, ultimately, obviously, it's the head and mine, but, I'm a bit of a soft touch, really. I am.
All right. Thank you, Maria. Stuart, can you give us a secondary perspective? What happens in your school?
Yeah, I mean, I was just typing into the type pod there at the time that we're actually... we've invested in our buildings. We've took a sort of longer term view. We've put in solar panels and so on, with the idea that whilst we've got that bit of capital money now, that'll save us in the future. It's all sort of tied up in various pots. And then there are certain things which we sort of try to protect, and almost as a bit of a lost leader, really, like music, just because of sort of the enrichedness that it brings to the school. But apart from that, it is really just looking to cut as much as we can, and our leadership team has contracted this year because those are the most expensive posts in the school, and basically we've all just picked up extra.
Okay, good. I'm just scanning down, so I've just made the chat pod bigger so you can all just read what other people have said in case you've missed any of that. Good, okay, thank you. And so we mentioned earlier, someone mentioned earlier about pupil premium funding, and just wondering if there are any other sort of areas that you would target funding for particularly, and aside from pupil premium, whether there's anything which is has its own sort of area of funding attached to it, I guess other than special needs as well, which obviously has statements children do have their own. Anyone got any examples of that where you have a particular pot of money targeting a particular function in school that you could share with us? It's interesting because that in my time I was a deputy head in charge of funding in a secondary school resources, and then pretty much everything had a pot of money attached to it, but that was 20 years ago. Things have changed quite a bit since then. Do any of you have that in your, maybe in your school development plan, that you just have certain areas that you say, right, this is going to be a priority for funding, or is it?
Joe, yes.
Go on, Joe. Sorry.
Yes, we like you just intimated there. We used to have a setup where every subject leader within the primary, within our primary school, had a pot of money that was a budget, so to speak, that the head allocated. We then revised that and went to a wish list system where subject leaders had to approach the head with a wish list of resources that they would like for their subject. And then the allocation of budget largely went, unfortunately I'll say, on English and maths.
Okay.
And that's currently where we are now. And, as somebody else mentioned earlier, very little funding on the foundation, the majority going on the core subject areas.
Okay, and that's, yeah, that also prompts me to ask about literacy and numeracy catch-up, which I think is £500 per student, if I remember rightly. So this is for secondary. I was just wondering if that money goes when the national funding formula comes in, because there's no mention of it anywhere that I've seen in any of the documentation, so it's difficult to get a handle on whether it will be there additionally like pupil premium will, or whether it's just going to be lost, because they have mentioned pupil premium separately. If you lost that catch-up funding, would it have a major impact on the kind of resources that you buy, any services that you subscribe to? Just trying to anticipate the effect of that funding being removed. Anyone, any thoughts about that? Nope, okay. I guess it's quite a small amount in most schools. It just seems to have gone into the pot, I think, mostly. I thought I'd better check. Good. So, talking about national funding formula, the report, the BESA report says, I'm just going to quote from it, page 10, part of the reason for contraction in resource spending is budget uncertainty relating to pending changes in the funding formula. So, when I asked you about funding earlier, some of you mentioned about the fact that funding formula is going to give you less than you've got now. Just wondering whether the impending impact of national funding formula is actually affecting your thinking about how much you're going to have to spend on resources budgets. Has it actually hit home yet in terms of your decisions about resourcing, or is it something that you're still sort of thinking, well, we don't know, but it's not really having an impact yet? Any thoughts about that?
So we have the business manager and an accountant who are all the time projecting ahead and looking ahead. So it's kind of being mindful of the fact that things are tight and potentially getting worse, etc., etc.
So it's more about budgets contracting rather than national funding formula per se?
Possibly so, yes. Yes.
Okay.
And, there's, with everything, there's a degree of uncertainty moving forward anyway, because lots of other things could impact on, the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay. Any other thoughts about national funding formula?
I was just going to say there's a website, I don't know if people are familiar with it, it's called Schoolcuts, schoolcuts.org, and you put your postcode in, it tells you in 2019 literally how much your budget probably will change by, and how many teachers you stand to lose. And we were looking at it as a group of heads actually today, and it's quite, it's quite scary, it's quite shocking. We're a one elementary school with 8 teachers, and according to this, in 2019 we will lose 4 teachers. I don't know quite what that would mean, classes of 60, but yeah, it's quite interesting to see what they're saying the future impact will be, so that it may not happen in the next year or so, but by 2019 there seems to be really dramatic changes of schools losing like £3 billion a year.
Yeah. So the government has produced lists of how much every school in the country will get under the National Funding Formula. So I guess what they've done is worked out the average cost per teacher.
Yeah.
And then divided that into the amount of money that's going to be lost. And simple sum, but I guess it's up to you where you choose to make the cuts. But yeah, interesting. So schoolcuts.org. Let's check that one out.
Schoolcuts.org UK. You just literally put your postcode in, comes up straight away, tells you what your budget change will be, how much you lose per pupil, and how many teachers you are standing to lose.
Right. Interesting.
Definitely have a look.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Thank you. We'll do that. Any other thoughts about National Funding Formula? Yep. Okay. Good. I think we sent you all a guide to the National Funding Formula. I don't know if you saw that. If not, if you want a copy, just let us know and we'll send you one. Okay. So, just picking out something else from the report then. So it says in the report that secondary schools are concerned that they are no longer well equipped with teaching and learning resources. For those of you in secondary schools, would you say that was accurate description of your school, that you're no longer well equipped with teaching and learning resources, or do you feel generally happy, or are there pockets where you think you could have more? Any thoughts about that?
Hello, Stuart. I think at the moment we're still well equipped, because I think we've had some, relatively we've had some good years over the last sort of decade.
Okay.
But I think going forward, you can see, as stuff starts to tire, then it's going to get increasingly tight.
Right.
But which is why we sort of concentrate really on the more expensive teaching and learning resources like ICT. We ensure that we have those on like a 3-year rolling programme so that we don't get hit with a huge bill being sort of stored up.
Yeah, Zoe here. I would reiterate what Stuart says. I think, in terms of the teaching and learning resources, that we've kept things stable and that the students now wouldn't notice any difference to what students, 2 or 3 years ago would have had available to them.
Right. Okay. And anyone else? Anyone in the position of thinking that they're under-equipped now in any particular areas? Okay. And so Stuart and Zoe mentioned about this is primary and secondary about the sort of obsolescence of IT equipment in particular, and I guess that's always been something of an issue. But I was wondering if there's anything that you're anticipating. So even if you're not under-equipped now, what, apart from IT, what other things are likely to need some investment in the next, 2, 3, 5 years? Any major areas that any of you have identified as being something that's going to need some extra funding?
Zoe here. In terms of IT, we're having a lot of discussion about the students and what they use. We have mini laptops and all sorts of equipment that's available, but whether we should move towards the bring your own device kind of model and things like that, which obviously would create some savings, but then you have to be careful about being fair and equitable to everybody as well.
Okay. Do you think that's likely to happen then, the BYOD policy? What are the odds of that actually being implemented, would you say?
Well, I think it's pretty likely to encourage students that, they are welcome to bring their own device should they wish to. And to be fair, although, we're not a wealthy area, many of the students have smartphones, so they have a lot of their own devices already.
Right. So you're just trying to capitalise on that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We don't. So it's Elizabeth. We've stopped printing school diaries, and it all goes online now.
All right.
So that's saved money.
Yeah. Good. Any other things that you're going to be investing in particularly?
That's made me think, sorry, it's Zoe again here, but about the school diaries, because we've moved to what many schools have got, Show My Homework, therefore there's no need for planners. Planners were a big expense, but actually the Show My Homework online homework system is actually a lot better anyway, so
right.
that provides some savings.
Okay. I guess if students are bringing their own devices into school, they just get it all on there anyway.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, any other areas where you think you might be having to invest in the next 2 to 5 years?
So it's Elizabeth. We've invested in our own kind of like alternative provision unit, so we don't have to pay providers.
Okay.
So we feel like it does a better job, and
Yeah.
that's quite a lot of savings if we can do it. So we've got staff who solely work in that unit, but overall, if you look at the savings, probably.
Right. Interesting.
There.
Good. Thank you. And any other suggestions? Okay. Good. So I'm just going to put something else up on here on this report. So this is there's actually a few pages on this one, so I will. So I think you can scroll up and down this yourself now. Can you just try that and see if you can scroll?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just talk through what this is showing. So we've got 4 pages each of Key Stage 1, 2, 3 and 4 as you go down. We've got different subject areas, and the question asked is in the top right hand corner. You'll see I've highlighted the word become on there. So in the coming year, which of the following subject areas are likely to become a spending focus? So I'm not sure this is the best phrasing for that particular question, because it sort of assumes that it isn't already a focus but will become one. You could read it that way, or you could read it as it just is going to be a spending focus even though it already is. So it's a bit difficult to tell. But you can see the changes over the year compared to 2016, and just the same thing as this picture before. These aren't percentage changes, they're percentage point changes. So not the clearest of sets of information, but I guess we can see there that English, Maths and Science are still pretty high at Key Stage 1, with Science apparently growing, and at Key Stage 2, not Science, Maths has declined, so down 21 percentage points compared to last year. But maybe that's, the question was become, so maybe it was already well established and it was a priority last year, we don't know. At Key Stage 3, Science is pretty big compared to English and Maths, and up 6%, but English up 20 percentage points at Key Stage 3. And at Key Stage 4, Humanities seem to have got a bit of a boost. I think you can guess why that is the case. Not sure what to talk about yet, but I'm just wondering whether any of those changes sort of chime with you. Any comments about that? Whether Key Stage 1 Science is growing, whether Key Stage 2 Maths is declining, as we said there, or any other changes that you'd like to say on a curriculum subject basis in your own school?
Sorry, Elizabeth, I think that at Key 4, particularly, you'll see an increase in resource spending for subjects like humanities and modern foreign languages, more children taking them.
Okay.
So there's an increase in pupils in those areas doing those subjects, so resource spending is going to go up.
Okay, so I've just scrolled down to Key Stage 4. Yeah, so humanities going up 28% at Key Stage 4. And this is presumably because Progress 8 is maybe schools are encouraging schools to enter more students.
Well, a lot of schools are doing it as they're kind of almost making them core, I suppose, that all children have to do humanities, all children have to. We don't do that at my school, but I know a lot of schools do, so obviously you're going to have a whole cohort taking those subjects, so you need to increase your spending in them.
Okay. Zoe, it's also the EBAC, because you have to have a humanities and a modern foreign language within the EBAC, and the government are looking at 90% of all students having access to a full EBAC curriculum.
Okay, and I was interested in the. Thanks, Elizabeth, for that. Just looking at the Key Stage 3 English, so that's showing a 20% increase in priority at Key Stage 3. Just wondering if any of the particular secondary folk have any notion about why that might be, why a greater focus on English in Key Stage 3?
I think, Stuart here, I think both the Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 just shows really the timeline that we're on, that humanities are coming to the changes now in their specs, so you are going to expect some extra investment there.
Yeah.
And then Key Stage 3, with the sort of pushing the new changes at Key Stage 2, and again you've got to sort of ensure that your departments are well resourced at Key Stage 3, particularly with the Ofsted Key Stage 3 report about wasted years and so on. We've certainly thrown a lot more at English this year at Key Stage 3.
Would you not expect maths to be increasing on the same basis then?
I would, yeah, I would. I'm not so sure why that isn't actually.
Yeah, so I would agree. I mean, with English, it's new text, it's new books, etc., etc. But likewise, with maths, a change in syllabus, curriculum, etc., etc. So yeah, that is surprising.
Okay. And also notice at Key Stage 3 that computing's down 26 percentage points to 20%. So I'm guessing last year that was boosted because of the newness of computing, and now that's not so new. It's not such a focus. Would that be a reasonable interpretation?
So yes, I would say so. Also, you've got, in terms of the maths and the English curriculum, major change. We've got the mastery curriculum being brought in, which our school is kind of well underway with, but I know that other primaries are there or thereabouts with dipping their toes into that kind of area and needing funding, resourcing CPD for that. And of course the English curriculum has changed quite considerably at primary level over the past couple of years, with the grand focus and the kind of the raise in attainment needed by the children at the end of Key Stage 2. So yeah, I wasn't surprised by the breakdown for Key Stage 2 myself.
Okay, good, thanks. And just looking at Key Stage, so the dip in maths, so we've got 21 percentage points in maths, Key Stage 2, and 15% in Key Stage 1. Any other comments about why that might be? Do you think, again, it might just be that the national curriculum changed the year before, and so maths got harder throughout primary curriculum, and therefore last year, maybe the year before, that was a bigger focus, and this year it's not such an issue because it's bedded in? Does that sound like an explanation?
Joe, again, particularly as this is coming from both my senior leader and year 6 hat here, I think the curriculum change and with this mastery focus had required more resourcing last year and the year before, like I say, in terms of CPD, in terms of resources for the classroom. So that's certainly where we put our kind of our priority in terms of funding. And English, although it needs to remain a priority, funding-wise, it came, CPD came internally and so on. And now we've had a quite natural sort of dip in English at the expense of the maths. So we're now having to look to put more money behind the English this year, and therefore release some of the funds from the maths.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, good. And can I just ask if any of you have any subject focuses that you're investing in more this year or next that we haven't mentioned one way or another in this last few minutes? Any of you investing in, art, design, technology, languages? Okay, good. Okay, so let's just hide that one, and I think this is the last bit of data I'm going to show you. Just a sec. So again, this chart needs a bit of explanation, I think. Let me just fiddling about a bit. So this chart is where has the spending focus shifted for 2017-18. So in other words, this is a question which is anticipating key areas again. So we had talked about key areas before and comparing them to previous years, and this is looking at what are likely to be key areas again next year. And again, we can see at secondary school next year that the content decline, and again the bubbles are percentage points, although they're not labelled in any way at all. We've worked out that's what they must mean. So the -38, for example, for print and digital content, I think we've discussed why that was this year, and I guess that's the same as next year, so the spec changes have gone through. Obviously it's bigger in primary than in secondary. Both of them showing a big dip in equipment for next year. Well, not big, but it's certainly not insignificant. Any thoughts about that? What kind of equipment do you think schools were thinking of when they said they were going to be spending less of it next year than this? Any guesses or suggestions or anything from your own experience about what that might be? Okay, I wonder if it's then maybe just a sort of catch-all for we're expecting to spend less, but we don't know about furniture. Probably won't do as much refurbishment equipment, whatever that means. We'll probably spend less of it. Do you think it's just that sort of level of response, so it's just not particularly well thought through?
I'm just wondering whether specialist subjects, it's managing the equipment that we've got already rather than thinking of updating it and things. Okay. I'm thinking of product design or food or music or something like that. So it's a pure guess, but possibly so.
Yeah, so I'm guessing so the kind of things that you're just talking about, those sorts of equipment that tend to be sort of repairing or renewing really high value things, and you probably will do less of that because or updating. In product design you might have a newer, more up to date cutter or whatever, but that won't be happening. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. That's a more interesting explanation than mine as well. Thank you. Any other thoughts about that one? Okay, and we're also looking at the teachers, again both increasing here, 12 and 13 percentage points respectively, primary and secondary. Do you think that is because schools are actually going to be spending more, or do you think that's just the fact that other things are less of a focus and therefore teachers become more of a focus?
Catherine, I think a lot of us mentioned at the beginning that we were going to increase our pupil numbers, and that means we have to have more teachers, and we're certainly increasing our pupil numbers.
And I'm also, Zoe here, I'm just wondering whether it also includes things like the pensions and national insurance contributions that have gone up, and where the schools haven't got extra money for that but are having to find an extra 12%, which is a lot, really.
Yeah.
Stuart here. That's exactly what I thought it was actually. It's just down to pension contributions.
So it's all sort of system-driven increases rather than anyone actually investing in more staff or incentivising staff highly.
Elizabeth, I agree with everything everyone's just said about why that might have gone up, but we've also overstaffed slightly in certain shortage areas like maths and English.
Okay.
In the foreseeing that, if teachers leave, you're not going to have that the issue of recruiting,
right?
Which we've had in the past. It's been massively problematic, particularly in maths. So that's what when we have interviewed, if there's been we might have been interviewing for one, but we've ended up taking two.
Okay, so you see two good candidates and you think, let's not lose one of them.
Well, if someone's probably gonna leave in the next 2 years, just because it's such an issue in certain areas, recruiting a certain standard of teacher, particularly maths.
Okay.
That's what we've done.
So presumably they teach outside their subject specialism.
Well, like I said earlier, we've also got the alternative provision unit, which they would teach in. So obviously that is not necessarily overstaffing. They've all got a full timetable, but that works that way, and it means that we can have smaller classes in English and maths as well, where we want to band, particularly now with the new assessment kind of like format coming in.
So that so it's not really overstaffing then, is it? It's actually
it's basically investing in the subject area, I suppose, isn't it? By investing but staff.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. Okay, good. So I'm just checking my questions. Yeah, good. I think that's enough of that one. So I just wanted then to think about a couple of other things. One about sort of general budget allocations and whether that's changing. So I haven't bothered copying the data down from the report on this, but basically it's saying that resource budgets are down per pupil about 6% this year, and next year it'll be a bit less, down a bit less for primary and down about half that for secondary. Just wondering if the sort of the contraction of budgets for resources actually is changing the way you allocate them. So again, just going back to the way I used to do it in my school, was that we, and I know this is a common practice, departments have their own budgets, and in primary you might have a subject allocation budgets, and then you would bid into a central pot for anything additional that you needed on top, like if you wanted a new set of textbooks or bigger expense. Have any of you changed the way you allocate budgets within school as a result of the contraction, or just generally, I suppose? No, we're all just doing the same things. Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay, good. So I've asked you about deciding. Okay, good. I think we'll leave that about budget then. So I just if I've got this. Sorry, this looks a bit horrible. Bear with me. I don't know if any of you have seen the school efficiency metric. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Have you?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the green line here is my school, which you'll see is I'm chair of governors, is top and highest efficiency decile. So just a quick recap on the way this works. It's for every school and academy, and I'll say that because they worked out in slightly different ways. Each school's compared with 50 near neighbours based on its profile, and the profile of these things here, so percentage SEN and percentage free school meals, and then it's the efficiencies worked out on the value added, effectively just divided by the funding per pupil. So my school, Caris, is doing well here because it's got a high-ish value added for. So, and then you compared to within a group of 50 based of SEN and free school meal profile, which is sort of the most basic way you could possibly do it, I guess. And it's also, just share this with you. Sorry, just a bit of fiddling about. Oops, where's that gone? Right, went behind for some reason. Oh, sorry. Ah. Right, sorry. A bit fiddly this thing sometimes. So I don't know if you've seen this document as well, which is the school's buying strategy, came out last month. So those two things are both new initiatives from the DFE. So the schools efficiency metric is it's not being used as an accountability measure, but it is a way of helping schools to see how efficient they are compared to other schools. So if you found yourself in the lowest decile and you thought you were doing pretty well in terms of how much progress your kids were making compared to how much money you spent, then I guess that would come as a fairly nasty shock to you. Have any of you, sorry, I'll just come back to the school buying guide strategy in a minute, but this efficiency metric, how many of you have actually sort of engaged with that and looked at it in any detail, maybe made any decisions based on it? Has it had any impact at all? No.
I mean, it hasn't for us. I think we're just watching every penny anyway. There's so many things that can measure your skill on. It's just keeping your head above water, keeping your results as high as you can, and then trying to manage your finances as best as possible.
And do all of you know what your number would be, what efficiency decile you would be in? Is that sort of a number that you are aware of? Like if I asked you now as a quiz, I won't.
No, I'm not aware.
No, I'm not. No, I'm aware of that the data exists, but I'm not aware of what our school is.
Okay.
Likewise.
Okay, so I suppose the question then is why is it because you already know? Is it because you don't care? Is it because you know as much as you need to? As Stuart was saying, is it just about trying to save as much as you can so it doesn't really matter?
Well, Catherine, it doesn't really help knowing the number. We know we've got to try and save money and do the best with our results, as Stuart said. So a number doesn't really mean much.
Okay.
And so I think it's probably something more that the business manager and the accountant will take care of and look at.
Okay. And I think another aspect of it, I can't remember actually, it's a while since I looked at it now, but I think another aspect of it is that you can then drill down a bit and find out which areas you're spending more than those other schools are. So for example, if you're in anything below 5 in the deciles, if you're in decile 6 overall, you could then look and see, oh, well, actually we're spending too much on CPD or ICT or whatever else it would be. Too much being compared to the other schools in your family of 50. Would that be a useful bit of information to get from this external source, or would you think that you or someone in your school, your business manager, would have that level of understanding anyway and therefore wouldn't need to look any further? So and see if there's any sort of value in the other aspects of this.
Sorry, I would think any data that you can have, you can use however you want to use. So yes, although they would be expected to have an overview, there's no disadvantage to having extra data. I'm just looking and noticing that these are all academies that are mentioned on here.
Catherine, I'm just muting your line for a sec.
Sorry, I'm making a noise again. Yeah. I'll try another extent.
Okay, that's probably easier. So, thank you.
They run out.
Yeah, so I think... Actually, that is interesting, you're right. They're all academies. That's probably because, in fact, that is what it is. It's because my school's an academy and it's compared it to 50 similar schools, and I imagine it's compared it to academies. Yes. Because the way the funding is reported is different in academies in schools, and so you have to compare them differently. Okay, good. So it sounds as if the decile ranking isn't particularly interesting, but the data that you could get, which is sort of helping explain areas where you might be performing less well and dragging your efficiency ranking down, might be useful. Okay, does anyone else have any other comments on that? Does anyone think you don't need a tool like this to tell you because you've got the data yourselves anyway?
I think it's always helpful to be able to compare yourselves to similar schools, even if it means that it's a school that you can potentially speak to and take advice from.
Okay. And what if then you found that next time you had an Ofsted visit, the Ofsted inspectors came to you with this number and said you're only a 7, explain, or Ofsted would do it. Do you think that would change the way you saw it? Would you be able to explain to them why you were where you were in that ranking, do you think?
Only if you'd used the information and you'd had access to it, and
so if Ofsted were going to ask you that, then if you expected Ofsted to come in with this efficiency measure figure, would you then look at it and try and explain it more to yourselves, do you think?
Well, I think that would be really important, because you'd want to be able to, sort of state your case and explain and things like that. So, and I guess there is, although you know about the efficiency of your own school, hopefully, there is no other way of comparing it with other similar schools other than having something like this. You can't create it yourself.
Okay. And
Maria, I really like it.
You really like it?
I do, but then before I came back into teaching, I did quite a lot of work for the civil service, so, numbers and things like that. I really like it. It would then give me another piece of data to back up something else again.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the interesting things I noticed about it actually is, and it's obviously intentional, is that they put the contact number of those schools in there. So presumably that's so that if you are a 7 rank, you could phone up Barton Court Grammar School in Kent and say, how have you got to be number 1?
Yes. Yeah, we're a 6.
Yeah, all right. So can you imagine doing that? Is that something that you would do? Are there particular areas of maybe spending or funding?
I think at the moment, so much depends on where you are in the country and the size of your school and what the local authority offers like for you and so on, so that it would have to be a really similar school for us to be able to get anything meaningful from it, I think.
So would it have to be really sort of similar in terms of in the same local authority? Is that sort of?
I think so, and also in terms of size. And then also, I mean, it depends on the local context. I mean, we've got a much larger secondary school very close to us, so you're in a different situation there. But we're very lucky we've got a new build, so that might be different to a different school. I think really it's helpful. And if there was anybody where, as you say, you could be pointed in a direction of somebody who's doing it well, but it could depend on several things. They could be a teaching school and get access to lots of young, high-quality staff that are quite cheap. You might be in an area where actually you've got to pay more of a premium to get staff.
True. Okay. Which brings me on to this fella. Okay. How many of you have read the Schools Buying Strategy?
I haven't, I'm afraid, Catherine.
No. Definitely not.
I'll give you a quick glimpse of what's in it then. So you'll notice on the third line down, there's that word again. And on the line underneath that. And in fact, it's repeated quite a lot throughout this document. And it's talking to access to buyers networks, it's talking about local school business managers networks and help with buying difficult areas. There's then a lot of the annexes, there's quite a bit of that as well, which is sort of data about all this stuff and some case studies. So it's quite a sizable document. It's 22 pages of strategy, effectively. And it feels to me as if there's a big emphasis, along with this, publishing this at the same time as the efficiency metric, that there is likely to be more of a drive on schools to demonstrate efficiency. So as if there weren't enough pressures, and this is the reason I brought Ofsted into it, presumably that's the mechanism by which they would appraise this. Do you think that you will, so we've had lots of examples of where you are saving money and where you're prioritising the funding that you've got. Do you think there are other things that you could be doing that you could look at, for, just to scroll back up to the next again, so things like these buyers networks or SBM networks where they might get together and aggregate purchasing. Do you think you're likely to go more in that direction in future? Is aggregated purchasing, for example, let's start with that, is that something that you're going to want to be doing more of?
Catherine, that's one of the reasons why we want to join the Academy chain, because they will have that buying power, which we haven't got as a single school.
And what sort of areas would you be wanting to get that way today?
Well, I'm hoping all sorts of things. I mean, even things like sort of buying photocopiers and those sort of resources. I'm hoping that they will be able to buy, more in bulk, so that we will benefit.
Okay. Okay, so that's the MAT alternative. Any other aggregated purchasing that you're doing? Are you working in partnership with another, perhaps just another school to, provide staff or supply teachers or any of that sort of thing? Okay, it's interesting because outside maths there doesn't seem to be a lot of it going on.
No.
So there are all sorts of mechanisms for doing it. I was looking at, I can't remember what it's called now. Can't remember. One other anyway, which is a sort of aggregated purchasing. So you sign up to a website and they guarantee percentage savings on certain things. If the government is putting out documents like this and producing a new sort of school ranking about how efficient you are, do you think that that's likely to change the way you think about funding, or does it still just come back, as Stuart said when we first mentioned it, it just comes back to you saving as much as you possibly can? Will it make any difference to you, I suppose, if the government's putting pressure on you to save, other than the fact that you're just trying to save anyway?
Well, it could if you were questioned about it, Zoe, by the way. That would impact. But I think, as Stuart said, we need to save money anyway, so people are mindful of all of these things. If there's more information about where money's being perhaps not misspent, but unnecessarily spent, then that could be used.
Okay. And what about if there was, I'm just trying to squeeze in one last question. What about if someone produced a system where, do you know the which guide for buying, if you're buying a laptop, you might look at which laptop or which whatever. If somebody came up with a school equivalent of that, which was looking at maybe product type, so it could be which laptop is best for my year 7s, or it might be something like which product is best for improving boys' reading. So it could have a product focus or a sort of school issue focus. Is that a service that you might be interested in? Would you pay for it? Any thoughts about that?
Would be interested in it. I don't know that you'd want to pay for it, and I'd always want to know whether there was any vested interest in it.
Okay.
So maybe I'd be a bit cynical about it.
So
yeah, I agree.
Sorry, yeah.
I agree with that. I agree that it's a really interesting idea, but you'd want to know a little bit more in detail about it, because I find it odd that you'd have to pay for it, because surely they'd be getting their money from suppliers and advertisements. So I don't know. I could because we haven't seen it. It's really difficult to understand how it would work. But I think it's a really interesting idea.
So if the suppliers were paying for it, would that not suggest a vested interest then?
Yeah, it would. But it's difficult to understand how it would work, though. But obviously, which works a certain way, doesn't it? And you don't pay for that, so they get their money through advertisements.
Yeah, no.
I don't know. It could be.
I think it is a subscription.
Oh, is it a
service.
subscription?
But,
Right, okay.
I'm not sure actually, but I think so I suppose the paying for it would be because you would, your buying would be smarter and you'd save money by making more sensible choices. But it sounds if you take.
It sounds really interesting.
Okay. What do other people think about that? The sort of witch guide for schools.
Maria, I think as people have said, if it was impartial, you would want to know that. And if you were saving X amount, then you would subscribe, but you would have to be careful with subscribing for the cost because, we're all getting rid of this app and that app, etc., because it's costing school so much on a yearly subscription. That's probably a prime consideration.
Okay.
There's a lot of morals sort of caught up in it as well because whatever we spend is public money and, maybe there should be more pressure on companies to be aware of that.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds as if you do need some sort of help with making decisions about maybe certain kinds of things. What about the sort of aggregated purchasing idea that we mentioned earlier? So this it's just a website I happened across earlier where I think the idea is that if you want to buy photocopiers, somebody mentioned earlier, if you said, okay, I need a photocopier that meets these specs and there's another 20 schools in the country looking for the same thing, and the website said, okay, we can negotiate, I don't know what it would be, 25% off the price or whatever. Is that sort of aggregated purchasing, would that be something you would trust, or would you think that aggregated purchasing needs to be, the other schools who are involved in the deal? How do you feel about that sort of difference?
Catherine, yes, I think I would like to know the other schools, which I suppose is why I trust the ones that we're going to go in the map together with. This is making me thinking, because at a smallest primary school, really, we don't have the nous. I haven't got a trained business manager. I've just got my little secretary. And, to make decisions like this is very specialised, isn't it? And that's not what we went into education for.
No. Okay.
No.
So it sounds like some things are just difficult to get your head around, whatever help you've got. Yeah. Okay. Good. Lovely. Sorry, it's a bit of a diversion at the end of it. I was just curious based on some of the things that you'd said earlier. Great. Thank you. So I think that's it. Good. Thank you again for taking part tonight and for looking at the data beforehand. And if there's any questions about anything that's tonight, if you any issues have affected you from this programme, we're here. And yeah, thank you. So Amy will send you through the usual paperwork for claiming payment for taking part tonight. But otherwise, thank you, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.